This is the College Planning and College Admissions One-on-One workshop sponsored by Potomac Oak Tutoring. I am Bethany Goldzer. I'm been with the company for about 5 years now, and I've done this workshop a few times. And it's just a resource that will be helpful to you as you start to think about what you can do to prepare your student for selective college admissions. And so I'll speak broadly about that, what you can do at various stages, and then we'll talk about what you can do when you have an eighth to a 10th grader, and then what happens when if your students between 11th and 12th grade, just to give you a really strong foundation there. Okay, if that sounds good, just give me a thumbs up. And then in terms of questions, you can go ahead throughout the presentation, feel free to put questions in the chat as you think about them. And all of those questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Awesome. So we have, oh, this is nice. We have Awas from Richmond, daughter in 11th grade. We have Stacy in Arizona, ninth and 11th grader. Samin in Austin, Texas, ninth grade, rising ninth grader. And we have Chicago here, PA, Maryland. All right, we have a good, nice group. And I like all of the ninth and 10th graders because it shows that you're thinking about this in, the long term. You're thinking about preparation now, which is where a lot of that prep happens earlier on in high school. So welcome. All right, so a little bit about me. I am based in the New York City metropolitan area. I went to University of Chicago. I'm a former teacher. I taught for 3 years in New York for New York City Public Schools, and then I've been a college admissions consultant for about 19 years. And really what I specialize in is helping students craft a story that they can tell to colleges that are their best fit and really show that alignment between who that student is, the journey that they have been on, and then the opportunities that they're seeking at a particular university that they're really interested in. And I've helped a lot of students along the way gain acceptance into their dream schools. And so I'm just here to share with you some of the things that I know really, really work in positioning students for very selective admissions. So we are going to start off and talk about the thing that colleges care the most about, and that is that a student has a really strong academic foundation. And so what that means is that a student has a high GPA, they've taken classes, they've put together the most rigorous course load that they can handle within the context of what their school offers, and that they've achieved great grades in those courses. And a question that I get all the time is that, is it better for me to take harder classes, or should I take class and get B's in those classes, or should I take, less rigorous classes and get A's in them? GPA is the most important thing. So, really making sure that your student has a high GPA is important. So even if that means they're not taking the most rigorous classes or they're taking a combination of those classes, students have to assess what their academic readiness level is and choose the classes that will challenge them, really allow them to stretch those skills. But at the same time, they're going to perform well in those courses. And so that takes some time to figure out. A lot of times we see when students make that first transition from middle school to high school, it's very difficult. They're not sure about what it takes in order to get an A. It's not, as it was in middle school where it didn't take them as much effort, but maybe now they have to learn study skills. They have to have stronger time management skills. They have to get used to speaking with their teachers and getting help during lunch periods or after school. And so once they figure all of that out, then they're able to gauge, how much help do I need in various subjects in order to get to that A. But very important that a student has the highest GPA possible going into selective college admissions, especially if you're in a very competitive school district where the average weighted and unweighted GPAs is higher than like 3.6. So in terms of which one matters more, I usually recommend that students report their weighted GPA when it comes to applying to college, because that usually what reflects rigor in the student's curriculum, and also it's typically higher And so that's what we want to report. And many colleges will actually recalculate the GPA as well. And so they'll have their own weighting system. In terms of honors or AP classes, again, most rigorous curriculum that your child can handle. It's not always the more APs, the better. The student actually has to do well in those APs, and there should be some alignment in the major of study or career path that your student's interested in studying with the APs that they're choosing. So I might have a non-STEM student who's really not interested in physics. It doesn't make sense necessarily for them to take AP Physics just because that it's offered. So, and we'll talk about that more later about making sure that the alignment is there. What thinking about early on. Usually it's around 10th grade. I want students to do some career exploration so that they're able to better align their high school curriculum to the careers that they're looking to explore. And it just will show being able to show evidence of that exploration, but then also making sure that they're choosing colleges that offer the majors that are aligning to the fields that they want to get into is really important. So yeah, in terms of honors or APs, it really is an individual based decision. It's really again about you understanding what your students' academic readiness level is and helping them and to ensure that they are getting the highest GPA possible. College courses are really underrated. I am a big fan of students taking college courses, so this is not the same as advanced placement courses. These usually happen in the context of either dual enrollment. So your high school might offer students an opportunity to take courses at a local community college, or students can take classes at a college over the summer and get some credit for it. I'm really a fan of those because colleges love this because it shows that a student has college level experience. And so that means that they're used to taking classes at a more accelerated pace. Sometimes they're with other students that are or college students. I've had students that are sitting in classes with other students who are currently in college. Students are getting a GPA, so they're starting college already with a baseline GPA, and then some students who really take full advantage of the dual enrollment program offered between their school and a local community college are able to achieve an associate's degree. So it can be a really good opportunity, and it signals to colleges, which is the thing that they're really concerned about, is can you handle the rigor that our curriculum offers? And excelling in an official college course and getting an official college GPA gives that a strong signal that the student can. So this is underrated. If your district does offer this opportunity, I do suggest that you look into it in addition to the AP program and the IB program or any honors classes that are offered. In terms of the second portion of the academic profile that colleges care about, in addition to the GPA, is the standardized test. So yeah, students ask this question a lot, which one should I take, ACT or the SAT? These are the two standardized entrance exams that colleges look at that to assess the student's readiness for college. It's a study of one. It depends on which test your student feels more comfortable taking, which one they're performing the highest at. And so it just depends. What I do recommend is if you're really on the fence about which one, is that a student sit for both of the practice exams. And, many companies give the practice exams, ACT prep or SAT prep, including Potomac. And so really sitting through a practice exam and just seeing which one is the student feeling more comfortable with and really answering that question. I usually want students to have a decision, decide which test is their best one and stick with this by the latter part of 10th grade and definitely into 11th grade instead of switching, taking the test back and forth, because there is a muscle that has to be developed, a test taking muscle that has to be developed. And then also once a student has a familiarity with the format and structure of an exam, it's good for them to continue test prep in that way. It's just because a lot of the test isn't so much the content, it's just that a student is comfortable with the methods, the way the questions get answered, all of those things. that can make the difference in the score. So those two things together, the GPA, the highest GPA that student can earn, the highest standardized test score, the ACT or the SAT test that student can earn. These are what formulate the foundation in terms of like assessing a student's chances of school or not. And so when I'm helping a student put together their college list, that is where we start. And so if they're falling within the range of who a school typically accepts with their GPA and their test scores, then that's a school that we can, talk about adding to the list. If they are outside of that range, then it makes it more of a reach school. And then if it's way outside of the range, like they're significantly below who that school typically admits, then I don't call that a reasonable reach. It becomes almost like the lottery. And oftentimes those students would be automatically denied. So it's really important that they're getting up to at least the middle 50% of the scores that a student who has applied to that school and been admitted typically reports. That's what you're going to be aiming for. So other things that matter outside of academics. So academics is number one. Cannot stress that enough. I think that sometimes there was some narrative around, and this is still somewhat true with holistic college admissions. There was this thought that I could, have, you know, mediocre grades and I can not report test scores and I could still have a chance at top 20 in Ivy League schools. And that's just not the case. Academics is number one. Okay. And then once a student has the academics that makes them competitive for an Ivy or a top 20 university, the next thing to focus on is really the activities, the quality of activities that a student is participating in. And hopefully, in this part of the discussion, I could bust some myths about the activities. So one, the headline here is that students who struggle are in college admissions aren't really ones that have the weak profiles. It's really they just look like other strong applicants. And I see this a lot in the most competitive school districts where students are they look the same on paper. They've, done music, they've done a lot of martial arts, they've done DECA, FBLA, they've done a lot of this the school activities, the school clubs, the things that their school offers. They've done those things and they've done a lot of it, but they're not a rememberable applicant because they look like the 100 other students that are applying to the college from their high school. And so what you want to do is to support your young person in identifying things that they're passionate about that allows them to break the mode and really stand out. And so some of those things would be what we call tier one activities. These are an absolute must for very selective universities. They really screen for this, like students who've won a national award, students who are at the top in a particular field. And being at the top of a particular field means maybe that student has done some research with a professor and that paper has been published, or they've launched a podcast and that podcast has been recognized in, a newspaper, or they've received some sort of special award from a local congressperson for a volunteer project that they've run. So it's just showing that I have excelled to the top in a field and it has been acknowledged by some entity that says that I'm that person. Um, Participate in a highly competitive summer program. And so this means that a student has applied for a program. It could be in STEM, it could be in music, it could be in athletics, it could really be in anything, but they had to apply for it. They had to get accepted. And there were they had to produce some sort of performance element to the summer program. So they didn't just show up to the summer program and participate. There was some sort of outcome of that summer program as well, or founding some sort of notable organization and receiving news coverage or public recognition. So these are just examples of tier one activities, but I think the through line here is that the student is demonstrating that they have some sort of knowledge or skills that has been acknowledged, and they are in their own lane. when it comes to this is that they were able to stand out amongst thousands of people. Other things, other activities. So, not all activities will be tier one. A student might have one or two tier one activities, but there are other things that any other activities that the student has in their profile should be reflective of engagement, leadership, passion, and focus. And I cannot emphasize this enough, quality over quantity. So the student participating in 20 activities that are very generic and where they're not really showing deep level engagement, maybe they do, they show up an hour at a time. They don't have any leadership positions in any of those activities. They can't show that they've produced any sort of notable product that is reflective of their skills and or their thought leadership in any of these activities. Those will not lead to a memorable application. It just gives that the student showed up and that they participate and that they're the generalist student. And I'll talk more about the generalist student on the next slide, but I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways I want you to get out of this workshop is that you want to help your student become a specialist and not a generalist. And what that specialist profile will lead to is more memorable essays that show personality. And it shows that students' passion, it shows their drive, and it shows that they went through high school and curated an experience with intentionality. All right, and then the next thing, the other thing too with is other than those activities are also strong letters of recommendation. So that the student early on is building relationships with their teachers. They are they are participating in class. They're being helpful. They're being collaborative with their peers. They are progressing conversations forward. They're entertaining various perspectives, and they're taking what they're learning in the classroom and that they're applying it in some way. And they're reporting that back to teachers. Teachers are really are clear about what that student is doing not only in the classroom, but also out of the classroom, and students are bringing that information back. And that happens through conversation. So I definitely always encourage my students to create like there be a regular cadence of communication with the teacher, not only in the formal classroom setting, but during lunchtime, after school, send them an email, give them updates, check in on them, take an interest in your teacher, things like that. Just building relational capital will pay dividends, not only just for college admissions, but it also just makes school more enjoyable, especially in subjects that a student's really interested in, and they're being taught that by that particular teacher. So definitely recommend it, relationship building. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about this distinct lane situation, because this is really probably the most important thing for a student as they're starting to curate their activity list, is that I think about their activities, essays, and recommendations should all point to the same story. It should be like the same. There's a through line. There's when I'm working with students on college applications, we come up with a positioning statement, which is essentially our thesis that that tells what our application is about, like who we are as a candidate, and that is the one line that the admissions officer who's reading your application will take back to committee to make the argument for why they should accept you or not. When a student is participating in a whole lot of activities, and they're just kind of all over the place, they present every single thing they've ever possibly have done in high school, and they're just trying to fit it into their application. They're doing things because they think it's going to look good for college applications, but they're not really thinking about how is this connecting and really starting at the end. And so I like students to kind of back into their profile. So again, around 10th grade, it's thinking about what careers could I possibly be interested in? Let's explore three. What majors would I pursue in college in order to get into this career? What high school classes do I need to take in order to prepare for this type of major? So if I'm interested in being an engineer, then I need to take chemistry, I probably should take AP chemistry. I should take physics. I should take advanced placement physics. Maybe I'm going to take some computer science courses just because I like the deep reasoning that is involved in the computer science courses that might help me with an engineering career. I'm going to take calculus, AB. I'm going to take linear algebra. So they're starting to think about here's what the curriculum is going that I'm going to take. There is a lot of problem solving and writing involved in engineering. And so maybe I'll take creative writing because I want to be really good at writing reports and sharing out information. Um, and then maybe I'll take AP US history because I know I'm going to need to write reports and cite sources and be good at presenting. And so they're backing into this is what my curriculum map needs to look like. And then at the same time, I'm encouraging students to also think about when they're planning their extracurriculars, think about how you're able to practice certain knowledge sets that you'll need to get into that career. And then also think about opportunities that you want to pursue. So I have students kind of do a T-chart. So knowledge and like practicing my knowledge outside of the classroom, we look at sort of the low-hanging fruit type of activities that they could explore that align with that career path. So in for my engineer, they might be looking at robotics. That's offered in school. They might be looking at mathletes. They might be looking at debate, okay? Because, they want to learn the presentation skills. Anything that's low hanging, we look at those. And then opportunities means that I want you to seek out things in your community that aren't where you can't just access it by going to your school's website or it's, announced in the school newspaper that this club is meeting, just show up. I want you to curate your like own opportunity. So that can mean that they're looking at local engineering firms and they're contacting people to see if they can go intern with them over the summer, or they're researching different professors that are at local universities who are specializing in the particular field that they're interested in, and they're launching an outreach campaign to see if they can secure themselves a summer research position, or they're entering. This is a big thing a lot of students have been working with have been doing lately. Are they're entering essay contests or scholarships because they know that writing and demonstrating strong writing is a very important skill set for colleges. And writing is the basis for everything, any career field. And so they're seeking out writing opportunities so they can go and so they can compete into writing, into contests, compete and win contests or scholarships. So I want students to look at those two things and start to replace generic things that just seem like they will look good on the college application to them showing I am building towards a narrative that shows I am preparing for this particular major and this particular career field. Now, I know students are young, they're 15, 16, don't necessarily know what they want to do. In addition to that, they'll change their mind. This happens. But usually I find that students get in the ballpark. So, if they're like, I know I'm not STEM, I rarely have a student, and I've done this for a long time, that started off that said they didn't want to do STEM and they were strong about that, and then somehow they ended up being STEM. A lot of times they kind of get the field right. They're kind of in the ballpark, or if they're not, they've learned a process for exploration. So how do you connect when you do kind of settle on what you want to do, even when you get to college, they have a process on how you back map from career to major to what I need to do, what skill sets I have. Also, um, a lot of times students are going after these broad skills like strong writing, presentation, critical thinking, problem solving that are transferable across fields. And their activities are reflective of that. So this is important because we are building towards showing that student is a specialist, that they have some deep knowledge in 1 to 2 areas. And that is the argument for why a particular school, let's say it's, for engineering, let's say it's Carnegie Mellon, why Carnegie Mellon is my best fit because I know that I am interested in this particular field in engineering because I've studied it with this professor, for the last 18 months. Carnegie Mellon has a professor that's focusing on this field and also offers the classes that I'm, really well positioned for. And so it's all about making that case for why a particular school is a good fit. And I mean, it's real. It becomes real. The student, once they start immersing themselves in this deep level of curation, it helps them also put together better college lists that they're well positioned for because um, they're doing that alignment work. They've been doing that alignment work. So anyway, that's kind of like the importance of that, helping them right now become curate that more distinct positioning, like that they are a specialist in this particular field, and a lot of that work, I would say, end of 10th grade, 11th grade, mostly by the end of the 11th grade, that's when a student will have that positioning statement more clear. And that's also the last opportunity that they have to really make a huge impact on the college application narrative anyway. And so anyway, that's when all of that comes to, they get clear on what their position is, usually sometime between late 10th grade and end of 11th grade. So test scores, we already talked about the importance of test scores a little bit, and this chart just shows you the importance. I know that many schools have turned back away from test optional and they are reinstating tests. So yes, the test is probably more important today than it was even a decade ago. It's just really important that students are doing well on standardized tests because for colleges, it is just a proven data point that shows a student's ability to handle the rigor of the coursework if they're able to excel in the test. In addition, schools are also cutting supplemental essays now. So far, Washington University in St. Louis, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, University of Georgia, Tulane are cutting supplemental essays. And so that means, again, a higher reliance on the test scores and GPA to tell the story about a student's readiness for their rigor. So very important, and that students are preparing for those exams and that they're doing as well as they can on those exams. And we all know this story. I mean, the acceptance rates are decreasing, and they've been that since over the last 10 years and accelerated definitely after COVID, but just every year it's getting harder and harder for students to get admitted into schools. And so, given how competitive it is, it's even more important that students have the higher academic profile, that they have more distinct activities that show that they are specializing in something, that they're aligning to what a particular college has to offer. And all these schools are not the same. I have to say, when I have a student come in that tells me I just want to get into an Ivy League school, and I'm like, well, why do you want to go to Harvard? Why do you want to go to Princeton? These schools are very different in what they offer to a student. And so a student has to be clear about, why this school over the other, what are they offering, and why are you a good fit for them, and vice versa. It is a mutual decision. So that's, again, why these things are really important, that students take the time and do this type of work now. So other factors that influence acceptance rates. So we talked about grades and SAT and ACT scores. We talked about having a really unique profile. This is one people don't think about. This is one of my more fun things to work on with students, is the department, or the school rather, that a student applies in could also have an impact on their acceptance rate. So what this means is that colleges or universities are divided into various schools, and so you could have the school of you could have the school of college of arts and sciences. You could have the College of Engineering, the College of Information Sciences, the College of Fine Arts. I mean, there's so many of them, but I always want students to take a look. We always, we'll go to a college's website, and I'll take them through the website and learn the anatomy of a college and how it's divided into various colleges or schools. And we look at all of the majors that fall under those particular colleges. but the acceptance rates can vary a lot. So just because you'll see, UPenn has an acceptance rate of 7%, you actually need to go look at you'd have to need to ask about each individual school, like what the acceptance rate is. So like for Wharton, it could be as low as 4%, versus the College of Arts and Sciences could be, like 8%. So it does vary. And in this example shows Carnegie Mellon where it can be really extreme, more extreme than Penn, where the College of the Computer Science School is like 7% acceptance rate. It's very difficult to get in. But if you apply to the College of Arts and Sciences or College of Humanities and Social Sciences, and you have a 26% acceptance rate. So sometimes I will add, like, before a student will say to me, I want to study computer science, I'll ask them, are they sure? Because sometimes they don't know for sure. They'll just say, go to computer science because I've taken a few coding classes and I think that's what I want to do. And they could be making it a little more challenging for them, because maybe they're not sure that they're interested in computer science. So, sometimes when I do some more digging, it's like, oh, I like math. I like applied math, and I could do applied math. Oh, great. So then you're going to be in a different school then, okay? Because then, and you'll be in your school will have a higher acceptance rate. And so maybe you're like in the College of Science now. So the point is that when you are working with your student and they're starting to think about and explore colleges, you are interested in their acceptance rates, you would want to check out the school level acceptance rate because it can make a difference in terms of their chances of getting in, depending on what school they apply to. So typically, College of Engineering, College of Computer Science, College of Business usually have the most competitive are the most competitive pools, and then arts and sciences or education tend to have the least competitive um, applicant pools. But it really depends on the school. I mean, if a student's applying to NYU, then NYU, their school of education would be really competitive. So it really just depends on the school. All right, the other thing that can impact the acceptance rate is gender. Okay, so however students identify, male or female, and this shows with MIT, the acceptance rate for a male is significantly lower than it is for a female. So just want to make sure you check that as well. The takeaway here is with the school and with the gender is that you have to sometimes investigate a little bit deeper in order to get to the true acceptance rate for the student, because it can that national acceptance rate that they publish isn't always the true story for your particular student, depending on what school they apply to and what their gender is. It also could be another thing to look at is also high schools usually have, or many of them subscribe to a Naviance or a SCORE that publishes scattergram data. And so I think the most accurate acceptance level like data to look at would be your localized data to see that students who applied to a particular school in the previous few years, usually the data runs between 3 and 5 years previously, what were the acceptance rates? I think that it tends to be the more accurate glimpse of what chances are for a particular school, and you want to look at students that have your similar profile. But it can vary. That's really the big takeaway here is it's vary, and it's there's almost a bit of a science to it. This is part of the work that I'll do with students is try to figure out what their specialized acceptance rate is so that we have really good data to come up with a more optimized college list. Because what I want to prevent is a student applying to a lot of schools that are not reasonable reaches for them or schools that aren't really targets for them. So the goal is to come up with a balanced list of target and reasonable reach schools, so that they have a lot of options when we get to May of their senior year. That's when college decision day is. So we want to make sure they have good options. They don't feel like they're settling for schools that they got into, that they only the schools that they got into, and none of them that they're really excited about. All right, so other things here. So there's the overall acceptance rate, which we talked about is usually national data, and it's we have to scrutinize this sometimes because it doesn't tell the full story. Like we said, it's school specific. There could be school specific acceptance rates. The gender can affect the acceptance rate. Also, when the student applies affects the acceptance rate. So it's usually harder to get into a school when a student applies during the regular decision round, which is schools have two different application rounds. They have an early cycle and a regular cycle. The early cycle is usually due sometime between October 15th and November 15th. The regular decision cycle is usually due around early January, but it can go as late as February. And so when a student applies in an early decision round, and that's when schools see the big, like probably the biggest one of the first big wave of applicants, the acceptance rate can be higher. So in this example for Cornell, it was 19.2%, whereas the regular decision acceptance rate is 5%. So students get like a huge boost, like a huge boost just by applying early and not during the regular round. All right. Okay. So, what can you do to be prepared for this really competitive admissions process at the various stages where your student's at? So, if you have a middle school student or early high school student, you want to think about things like where are they attending high school? Because this matters in terms of the types of classes offered, the just the environment that a student is in terms of is it motivating, is it collegial, does it have a really strong college prep curriculum? What potential academic majors would they be looking to explore? This is early high school is the time to do this, believe it or not. It's not when a student is in 11th or 12th grade. That's really where the focus has to be to college. You have to start at the end to get to where you want to go to. So, students who are on track to go to Ivy League schools have been thinking about this since middle school. A lot of these like questions about their future because they know it takes intentional work to get to an Ivy League college. Um, are you being strategic in picking your goals? Are you tracking your students' trajectory in Naviance? So Naviance is that tool that many schools offer that gives good data on admission statistics, but also has a lot of resources for students. You're able to track their performance and really have line of sight into what's happening on an academic front. Um, does their curriculum match to what schools are looking for, is that level of rigor? If not, then what can you do to support them in elevating their academic profile? Maybe it means tutoring. Maybe it means that a student has to get extra resources and support. Maybe they have to start test prep. I have a sophomore, a rising sophomore student, and she's going to be starting test prep, even for the PSAT, because I just want to make sure that she has all the resources that she needs to ensure the highest score possible. Since I know from years of doing this work that that's really going to be the make or break for her. And then the students' interests, are they reflected? Do they reflect what they're doing outside of school? So really thinking about that student, how they're applying their skills and knowledge outside of school in both and inside of school, and then taking full advantage of the summer time to do some of those more time like more like the activities that take a lot more time. I didn't mention volunteering, but volunteering is probably one of the highest rated activities like that a student can do that are not a tier that's not a tier one activity. A student really showing their commitment to their community and is and also just kind of given the range of different things that they can do on a volunteer basis is a great thing. And the summer is one of the best times to take advantage of volunteer opportunities. If your student is in the 11th or 12th grade, so their profile is largely set. So this is really the time where you'll want to start thinking about the college list and having a range of schools are really selective, reach schools in the mix, but then also target schools. And with target schools, these are schools where the student's academic profile fits within who they typically admit, and the acceptance rate is usually above 40%. Um, they have to be schools that a student would really go to. So if a student, when we put together a college list, and if they have some Ivies on there, and then they throw in some schools like Purdue or Virginia Tech, I asked them, would you, if you only got into Purdue, if you only got into Virginia Tech, would you go to this school? Excuse me. And if they say no, then it's not real. So we remove that school and we find real target schools. Because that's really important, having a balanced school list. And again, with the goal of making sure that students have options by the time they get to the May decision day. Do the colleges fit them? So will they be happy at these schools? Are we looking beyond the name brand of the school and assessing if that school is going to offer what we need in order to thrive? Where should I be applying early? A lot of that Naviance data that I talked about, that admissions data, is helpful. I think the most helpful in seeing where a student has really good early decision chances, because we can look at, like, it will tell you what cycle the students from previous years were admitted into, and what their academic profile was. So that can be extremely helpful. I also encourage students to go talk to their guidance counselor as well, their school counselor, to get the qualitative insight into where they have good early chances, because the counselor knows, they know all of this. They fill out the recommendation form for every single school, every single student in their class. And so they'll also be very helpful with some of that localized data. Um, and so when the student reports back and has we have the quantitative data, we have the qualitative data, then we're able to come up with a plan on where would be the best place to apply early. And my stance on this is that I want students to choose their early decision school as the one we're going into it. They have the highest chances, not the lowest chances. If a student doesn't have high chances going into it, like, and low chances going into it means that when I look at their chances, and coming from the school based on the school data, and I compare it to national data, if it's lower, if their chances are lower than the national rate coming from their high school, then no, it's usually not a great school. And I usually advise students to consider removing that school unless they just have to say. Like, sometimes some students just have to say. They're like, I need to apply to Harvard because I have to say. I'm like, okay, no problem. But I just want you to know that this is what all the data says. But anyway, that is uh, figuring out where do we apply early, and why. And the why is usually rooted in the data. Have you planned out trips to visit their top colleges? Now, it's not always possible to visit every single school before a student applies, but most schools do offer virtual tours. So I definitely recommend students do that. And then schools where they are absolutely their top schools and they're applying early, especially if you're going to ED somewhere. And so that means that you are applying early, is binding. If the student is accepted, then I absolutely would want that student to have seen that school before they commit to applying early decision. Have you leveraged all contacts? So these are folks, so professors, alumni, current students, these folks can be extremely helpful in giving students insight into what it's like to be on the campus. It can be helpful in just like decisions, but also essay content. When a student can really speak very pointedly about things that have come out of conversations as if they have gone there, that really is helpful for admissions officers who are advocates. So sometimes students need advocates when they are, especially if they are deferred from the early rounds into regular admissions or they are on waitlisted. It can be really helpful to have the school counselor call the admissions office and sort of, you know, give their seal of approval. Like, this is the student. Like, I was like a little surprised that the student didn't get accepted because they're very similar to other students we've had. And, I know the student really wants to go here and they would be a really good asset. Things like that can be helpful. Um, I've had students in the past that there have been certain clubs at a college like more competitive clubs, like a debate club or a robotics team that was well decorated at the school, and a person, not that, they're not calling the admissions and swaying them anyway, but it can be helpful again as an advocate to highlight there is a particular student that has applied, and I talked to them and they were great. And so I've heard anecdotally that that's actually has been helpful for someone when they're on the fence, when they're trying to decide between two applicants, and there's a person that has advocates that are saying that are sort of supporting things that are in the application. It can really help them out. Um, have they started brainstorming college narratives? So this is the time where, end of junior year, the student is starting to write their college essay and supplemental essays. So these are additional essays that colleges are asking as part of the application process. We work on those in August after the application goes live. So every August 1st, the Common Application goes live, and this is the application portal that students will fill out um, between 11th and 12th grade, the summer of 11th and 12th grade, and then it continues through the fall of 12th grade towards those admission cycles. So our early cycle in November, and then our regular cycle sometime between January and early February. Um, so early decision we talked about, it's binding. It can be less stress. You get earlier notifications. So students usually do hear back around December, right before winter break. That's when a wave of decisions come out, and there's a higher acceptance rate. Like schools like University of Maryland will accept 80% of their applicants in the early round. And UMD is actually early action. So it's the same timeline, but unlike ED, it's not binding. Some schools do have restricted early action, or they'll have single choice early action. So with any admission cycle, with any school submission cycle, you should always look it up specifically what their application deadlines are. Regular decision falls sometime between January and February, so that's not binding. The only binding is early decision. Early action's not binding, and regular decision is not binding. And rolling is more of a first come, first serve. So it means that as soon as a student applies, their application would be reviewed and they'll get a decision. So sometimes rolling school students can hear back within 2 to 3 weeks of applying. So there's all of these various cycles. It's important that you know which one you put as your student puts together their college list, that they know exactly which admission cycle they're going to apply as, because that impacts their the deadline or the timeline of their application work, which requires a lot of coordination between just the various materials, putting together the resume, the written parts of the application, activity statements, the general essay, the supplemental essays, and then also sending their score reports. Depending on when they are applying will determine when they'll need to send score reports from either ACT or from the College Board for the SAT. All right, so with the essays, essays are not summaries of students' resume. They're not summaries of the transcript. They are the opportunity for a student to show who they are and who they're becoming. So some of the most powerful essays are deeply personal, they're passionate, and they're purposeful. They're not they don't talk about academics, and so sometimes students are tempted to talk about specifically about academics or to talk about their achievements. Those essays are not interesting because because an admissions officer can see those already on the student's resume or in other parts in the application. So with the college essay, it should be about something that isn't there. That will make the admissions officer say, wow, that's really interesting. I can see that student on campus. It really establishes that student as a character and as someone that is going to add some value to the campus community. In addition to the general essay, students can be asked to write anywhere between 1 to 4 or like 15 more essays. I mean, when I work with students on college essays, they put it all in one book. We call it the College Essay Workbook. And I would say students that are applying to the most selective colleges, they're writing like 75 pages of essays. So again, that's why Planning accordingly and having a timeline is important because the a bulk of that essay writing is happening during the student's fall or senior year, which happens to also usually be the most rigorous um, academic time of a student's school career, because they're taking just many AP courses and they have a lot of obligations. And so time management, those time management skills that that student has been practicing are really tested when it comes time to writing their college essays and putting together their applications. All right, letters of recommendation. These will come from teachers and counselors for the most part. So usually I recommend students ask three teachers, even though some schools will ask for only one or two. I like them to have three just as a backup. So many crazy things have happened over the last few years where teachers have left. A student has asked the teacher in end of junior year, which is the best time to ask, sometime in the spring of junior year. And then the student comes back in the fall and the teacher's no longer there. Or the teachers went on maternity leave or paternity leave. So they're not going to be there to write that admissions letter. So I like three teachers. The one counselor, the school counselor will write a letter as well. So it's important that that student gets to know that counselor, since that person's letter is probably it has the strongest impact in terms of the recommendation letter. So counselor, getting to know that counselor is like a non-negotiable. If a student is eyeing a very selective or an Ivy League college, employers, coaches, and alumni, these are examples of other recommenders. And so the college application has space for a student to get other people to speak to that student's non-academic qualities. So maybe their ability to be a team player, their ability to where they show passion, they show drive, they show just a different level of determination. These folks, employers, coaches, alumni, pastors, um, religious clergy can sometimes speak to those really well for students, or professors, mentors. The list goes on. Asking recommenders early is important, and then also making sure to provide them with details. So, along with an ask, a student would provide their resume, and they would also provide a brag sheet, which is a document that a student can recount various scenarios with that person to make sure that they write stronger letters of recommendations. All right, other things that can be helpful to support an application would be if student is going through the recruiting cycle. So recruited athletes that can often get a boost. Even with recruited athletes, so many times the student still needs to get accepted into the school, especially if the school is Division III. That means that they have to get accepted still into the school. But once they get accepted, like they have to have the academic standing, the academic uh, foundation to still get accepted. But they have higher chances coming in as an athlete. Sometimes when we look at Naviance, there will be a student who's kind of like let's say we're looking at UPenn, and there'll be a student who's gotten accepted with a really low SAT score, like a 1,000 SAT score, and the student's like, well, how did that student get accepted? I'm like, you know what? It could be an athlete. That's why I want you to talk to your counselor, because sometimes the counselor can fill in those details and say, oh yeah, that student, the reason why they are typically lower is because I mean, not to be stereotypical, but sometimes that happens. It's like it's an athlete that has a little bit more flexibility um, with the SAT score and to get into top schools. But if it's like a Division I school, then sometimes they are more flexible. But other things to support musical ability. So they have a musical portfolio that can be helpful in the application, anything to display exceptional talents. Some schools offer interviews, so an interview can be helpful in giving the school an opportunity to get to know the student. Legacy is somewhat helpful, though not as much. It might give a slight boost, but it's more common these days that students have legacy, that it doesn't give that big of a boost, so I really wouldn't count on that. And then residency, it can some schools, like the state schools, require residency, and being a resident can give you higher chances. So in North Carolina, in particular, in-state North Carolina residents have a much higher acceptance chance for Chapel Hill than an out-of-state student where it's capped. So those are things that can be helpful. All right, so this brings us to, what we do, how we can support your student if you're interested in getting support, which I recommend because it is a lot to navigate. Um, if you're um, planning, if you want your student to seek out a very selective institution, we are the experts in that. We work with many, many students, and the majority of them get into top 40 colleges, and a significant number of them, of those students, get into Ivy and Ivy Plus universities. So it really does center on getting started. If you have an eighth, ninth, or 10th grader, let's get started, work on goal setting, exploring their majors and particular careers, talking about the test prep strategy and aligning high school coursework that they should take, extracurriculars, and thinking about how to make the most of summer, and then also exploring pre-college programs and internships program. And even if you don't work with us, like this work should still continue, but when you work with us, it just makes it a lot easier. It takes the guesswork out of it, and you get a framework that can help you start to think through some of these things and create a plan. We also help students, particularly my 11th grade, my rising 11th grade students who didn't do some of that like intentional work to build a really strong profile and to differentiate their profiles. We can do some catch up and we can reverse engineer a profile. It's been done. And it also is very helpful to students because they haven't necessarily had that space to think about, well, why have I done these activities and what are they leading to and what is my story? So really doing some reflective work and really kind of creating that narrative as we go that they will then use to have a really strategic application. In addition to thinking about what schools to apply to early action, early decision versus regular decision, thinking through college visits and um, building that college list. So making sure that that list is developed, having a really strong resume, and then assistance with the writing, the brainstorming, and all of the application work, preparing for interviews, getting strong recommendation letters from their teachers, and then navigating deferrals and wait lists. Those are all the work that we do. So we offer end-to-end support. So you can have a student who's an eighth grader is like, I have no idea what I want to do. I am just getting into high school. I have to learn a new environment. I have to, there's so much orienting to really helping your student get on the path to getting into one of the world's greatest colleges. And that's what we do. So in our last admission cycle, we had 67% of our students were admitted into an Ivy or Ivy equivalent university. 74% admitted into top 30 and 88% were admitted into a top 40 university. And a lot of this, the results come from really harnessing the natural talents and high achieving students that are attending schools in very competitive school districts and making sure that they're taking advantage of our most valuable resource, which is time. And we're planning strategically, and we are building profiles that stand out and ensure that they are a specialist and not a generalist. So we do offer free consultations. So you can, go to potomacadmissions.com, fill out an information form if you're interested, and hopefully we'll be able to meet with you and talk through your specific situation. So that is all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about anything I talked about. I know it was a lot, and we got it done in an hour. Um, but yeah, happy to answer your question. Oh, thanks for the applause. And you can drop a question in the chat, or you can come off mic, whatever's easiest. Um, okay, Isabella. Isabella has a question.
Hi, so what would like a highly selective school consider like a stronger like a competitive GPA, like unweighted GPA?
Yeah, 3.8 or higher. Yeah,
Okay.
3.8, 3.9. And it depends on the school. I mean, like a Stanford, a 4.0. That's what they're looking for. Georgetown, they like the higher, perfect, almost perfect scores. There's some schools that are score loving and there's some that are are more about demonstration of knowledge, but they still expect you to have a high GPA. But I think if you can aim for a 3.8, then you are going to be in a strong position.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, there's a question about recording. Elisa, I don't know if you're here to answer that. If this recording will be available.
Yeah, we're gonna make this recording available to anyone who register because that will be the only way we have an email on file for people here.
Great, thank you.
I have a question. Sorry, request. If she can drop the phone number with her in case sometime we need it or to be my son counselor so I can take her.
Sure. I dropped the website in the chat. I believe it has our office phone number on there.
Okay.
And then yeah, and we have a form. That's the best place. So if you go into that site, you can give us a call directly, or you can drop the details in the form. And then the consultation is there's no cost, there's no obligation. So sometimes it's even just good to know what should I be doing for our specific situation. It's just be helpful in having that kind of clarity.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, Isabel has another question. How big of a role does research and research programs play in an application? It really depends on how you got the research. There's two types. There's ones that you can pay for, and there's no competition there. You just, the a college will say, or some kind of third party program will host paid research programs. Those don't hold a lot of weight because there wasn't anything you really need to do except write a check and like your parents wrote a check and participated. The better research programs are ones that a student gets on their own. And those are the ones that I encourage students to go after. And they're not that difficult to get. It just takes a little grit and perseverance. And identifying like who are the people that are doing the type of research you're interested in and having an outreach campaign. Maybe you're reaching out to 30 or 40 of them. Most of them are going to ignore you. You might get a response back from three, and then you'll interview with one or two, and usually students get something that way. It's just a numbers game, but that is actually more impactful. Um, there are some research programs that you have to apply for. They are competitive, and there's no fee. In fact, they pay you. They give you a stipend. Those are also good. Okay. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then we can end here. And Elisa, she dropped the phone number to our office and as well as our office manager's email address if you want to reach out directly. Other than that, thank you all so much. You're a great audience. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.